What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Coach Cody Podcast. So today I have a guest, Austin Stout, which he's not new. I think you've been on the podcast now, I think it's your fourth time, something like that.
I'd say something, probably 4 at least.
So you're just kind of an official host on occasion now.
I'm like the periodic co-host.
So yeah, today I want to talk about neurotransmitters. I feel like it's not something that is talked about very often, especially in coaching, but is actually pretty significant. So I guess start off if you want to introduce yourself again for those who haven't, listened to past podcasts, and then, basically giving us a little summary of like what a neurotransmitter even is.
Yeah. So if you guys don't know me, I am, I've been a coach for going on about 15 and a half years. I coach a huge variety of different demographics, so I see a lot of different neurotransmitter profiles. There are a lot of different personality types. I work with anything in the functional health realm, anything you can pretty much imagine. Pro bodybuilders, national level bodybuilders, postpartum moms, autoimmune disease, you name it. So I'm kind of all over the board there. So I think this is somewhat of a fitting topic because there's a lot of different personality types and trends and patterns and things that you'll see with different types of individuals. So you might ask, like, why is that important for coaching, right? Like, how is that applicable? What does that do for us as a coach to know these things? And there's a few benefits. One is that most of what we do is pattern recognition, right? So we learn information and we learn application, but through repetition and practice, we get better at recognizing patterns. So how does that benefit us from a personality standpoint? Well, maybe you can pick up on some deleterious behaviors, right? Like early enough in the process where you're not digging yourself in this big hole, hopefully. Maybe you're just better able to relate to somebody, Maybe you can just relate to them better. Maybe you can figure out what's making them click a little bit better, right? Some people that come to coaches, they're very straightforward in what they expect. It's a very transactional. I tell you to do this, you do this, you report back, and then I tell you to do something else or do the same thing, right? And it's pretty cut and dry, but I would venture to say that's probably not the majority of clients, right? I would assume there's going to be at least some level of emotion, right, that goes into that. We're dealing with body image, we're dealing with health, we're dealing with all these other things. So there's a lot of other things from the emotion side and psychology side that are attached to it. So a lot of people are familiar with things like different personality types, and then maybe even like neurodivergent type issues, ADHD or having OCD or autism or like all these things. And so they know, the definition of these things. Maybe you have one of them. Maybe you can recognize these things. So I think what we could break down is like, what is actually happening on a neurochemical level? Can we do anything about it? Right? Like, are there actually like actionable steps that we can take? So what is a neurotransmitter? You asked that question. That's a good one. Yeah. So neurotransmitters are just chemical messengers. So they essentially are communicating between nerve cells and neurons. So they, like most things in the body, there's receptors, right? So like a molecule will get to the receptor, and then once the receptor is activated, that will cause whatever action that thing causes, right? Maybe it doesn't have to be a neurotransmitter. Hormones do that also, right? So there's a lot of things that have, this like chemical/receptor relationship. The main ones that if I started rattling off neurochemicals, because there's a lot of them, the big ones we think of would be serotonin, dopamine, maybe GABA, right? There's some other ones that are also in there that are probably known, but a little less known. Things like glutamate or histamine can even be classified as a neurotransmitter. Interestingly enough, I mean, if you guys are in like the functional health space or the gut, working with gut health, you probably have heard that term, or what histamine intolerance is, right? So how do we classify those in a couple different categories? The easiest way to classify them for the sake of discussion is excitatory and inhibitory. And some of them probably do both, or there's some kind of gray area in there. But we'll just say there's excitatory and inhibitory. So you have excitatory would be like things that make you motivated, energized, happy, cause some kind of like arousal response. So like if you go to the gym and your nervous system's firing up, right? Dopamine, that would be excitatory. So inhibitory would be something like GABA, So when you take that calming supplement where you're, like your L-theanine or whatever you guys take, right? That is raising blood levels of GABA, or levels of GABA in the brain, actually. So you're getting a relaxation effect from an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So there's one brings you up, one brings you down. Or they theoretically, what they're trying to do is stabilize. They're trying to maintain stability. So it's not this, and this is where we get into trouble. So this can kind of segue into like, well, what are the problems? The problems are that the body is always trying to maintain homeostasis, but it will try to defend itself or protect itself in certain situations. So like, yes, when you go to the gym, it's going to release excitatory neurotransmitters. It's going to release adrenaline. It's going to release cortisol, right? Blood glucose, right? So it's doing that because it can tell, like, what is this person doing to me? If you're beating the hell out of yourself, it's like a huge stressor. So we have to have all these things in there to keep you alert and keep you able to cope with that situation, so you can handle the stress of that situation, right? So you have that. Now at nighttime, based on your circadian rhythm, you probably have more inhibitory neurotransmitters being released because you want to sleep. But the body's kind of always pushing and pulling throughout the day to try to keep you in a relative balance. But if you're out of relative balance, then you're going to feel things like anxiety, maybe, right? Or depression, or maybe it could contribute to some of those other like neurodivergent type of, or personality disorders like ADD, and some of those things are also, so some of those things are genetic. You have predisposition genetically. Some of them are environmental related, like habitual things, because you've been in you've either by choice or not by choice, you've been in a certain environment for a period of time and you've learned, like learning habits. Your body develops these like neurochemical profiles. So if you have a lot of trauma from childhood, or if you've been a bodybuilder for 10 years and you've been super neurotic about everything, you probably like live in a certain space profile a little bit more than someone that doesn't do that, So I think that it's just as much what we're doing as it is what our body is born with, right? So there's both of those. So I think what's really interesting is when we work with clients. So, we're not clinical psychologists. We're not psychiatrists. We're not prescribing medications, and we're not diagnosing people with psychiatric disease, or I don't want to say disease or disorders, but we we definitely run into some patterns. I mean, what would you say the most common kind of trend in our space would be? Like with, would you say it would be like neurotic, anxious type? Would that probably?
Definitely. Yeah,
As
I'd
a
say
whole,
I feel like we all have OCD.
right? As a whole, right? And there's varying degrees of that, and there's obviously an OCD, and the way that we classify those things can be different. Like OCD versus perfectionism, like you and I have talked about that a little bit too, and differentiating some of those things. There could be OCD to the point where you, every time you go out to your car, you walk back into your house 7 times to make sure that your oven is off, right? Or you have some kind of like phobia, where you're like cleaning doorknobs all the time, that type of thing. Or there can be a level of neuroticism, which is kind of it's kind of what we're talking about, and that's the perfectionism piece, tracking everything, we're very like quantitative focused, you're very number driven, you're very data driven. The other thing, and this is where here's where things start to go bad, because being quantitative minded doesn't mean anything bad's going to happen. It just means that's just how you analyze well, right? Is having that kind of data. Where bad things start to happen, or where things start to get difficult, is that people with those personality types have a need for control. Now, they're like control freak. I'm like, yeah, you are. I mean, listen, I've been bodybuilding a long time. I have had plenty of my own therapy. I have fallen into those tendencies. I know. I mean, I feel it. I know it. It is at its core a need for control. And so that way, when you get caught outside of the house, if you don't have that meal with you, or something goes off plan that's out of your control, you can completely, like, you have this almost like a irrational response to how bad that actually is. When you're like, okay, well, it's actually probably not that bad because you went right back on it. What is that really going to do to you in the grand scheme of things? Right? Like, how bad is that? I mean, over my years of coaching, I have seen meltdowns over everything. I mean, anything you can possibly imagine. Like, they don't have the green beans I normally eat in the grocery store. Like, that kind of shit meltdowns. Right?
That's intense.
Yeah, it could be anything. And if you stopped and removed the emotion and looked at that rationally, you're like, man, that is ridiculous. That is completely absurd. Why would that happen? So, and I don't know what your experience with that kind of thing is, what that kind of stuff is with clients, but it starts to become more and more of an issue, because you end up with lack of flexibility. First off, that's the one thing. So you can be really goal driven, you can be really goal oriented, which is great, except when anything changes, you don't know how to pivot, or you're not willing to pivot, I guess would maybe be the word. Which, cool, you're like, do it at all costs, maybe, but what if that's not actually the best answer?
Yeah.
What if you're actually going to get a worse result than you would if you changed the plan?
Yeah, definitely.
And if you told that to somebody that's really goal focused, so what I would say to somebody like that is, if you wanted to break it down super logically, if I ask the question, you have this, this is what you want to do. You want to compete. I don't know. Like, that's a pretty standard goal. You want to compete in bodybuilding, or you want to lose 20 pounds, or we'll just say lose weight. And if I said, if you continue to do it this way, because whatever roadblock is preventing you from doing continuing this plan, or we can keep doing that, or we can go in this direction, which temporarily will probably feel a little uncomfortable because it's different, but it will get you a better result on the other side. Would you rather get a better result, or would you rather get a worse result? Like, could you answer me that question?
Yeah.
And I know it's not as easy as that. It's not, for someone that feels those things, it's not as simple as that, right? It's very much a mental battle. You can't, you don't tend to be able to rationalize things when you're in those types of situations, right? It's like, my body hurts, my gym progress is regressing, I'm not making it, I'm not looking any better, I'm kind of just staying stagnant, or maybe I'm even getting worse. So you hire a new coach, and I posted about this, yesterday, or I think, or the day before, and they want you to do something different, right? And you don't want to do something different, but I'm like, well, what do you have to lose? What you're doing is not working.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the takeaway on that. But within that OCD, we'll just call it perfectionism, because I think OCD might suggest something a little more extreme. It seems like, from the research that I've been able to find, they usually suggest that with those types of people, they're having elevated levels of excitatory neurochemicals most of the time. So that would be especially glutamate. So glutamate's excitatory, but glutamate, the best way to describe it is it probably doesn't feel quite as good as dopamine, which is also, it's kind of more erratic. So it's like it's bringing you up, but it's maybe just creating anxiety. It's not like it would be like if someone ever had too much stimulants or too much caffeine, you like went past the point of it helping to the point of this being uncomfortable. You're like, yeah. I'm stimulated, but I cannot direct this towards anything right now.
Just anxiety.
Right, like I can't actually put this to use. This is too much, So they're probably living in that state. Now they may have low serotonin levels, because you normally are seeing kind of a inverse relationship. So the excitatory is high, maybe the serotonin's low. So they're very anxious, right? The neurotic. Now, I think what's interesting about that is that I could see that pattern, but I could also see where eventually you're just burnout. You're still anxious, and you're still kind of anxious, and you're still maybe you still have the perfectionist tendencies, but your adrenal glands are probably burnt out. Your nervous system's like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore, right? And it could totally, and that's not even training related. That's just complete mental exhaustion, So then you're still, it's like you're still experiencing the side effects without the benefits, kind of, in a way, right?
Yeah.
And then you're just like, just sucks.
Yeah.
Like, man, this really sucks. Which is honestly, for myself, that was largely where I had ended up. And still at times I can tell, I'm like, okay, I feel that may be the direction that things are headed in, but recognizing the pattern, that's what I said at the beginning of the show, right? Recognizing the patterns helps a little bit there to realize that, okay, well, I need to take some inventory here. What am I doing? Do I need a rest? Like, what do I need to do to feel better before this gets too bad? And if you are that person, maybe you need outside help, maybe therapy, right? Medications can be prescribed. You know, there's a point with ongoing, again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not prescribing, but obviously with ongoing medication use. So if we were to say, well, this person could use an SSRI, for example, because they maybe have low serotonin, does that fix the root of the problem? That's maybe what you should ask yourself, right? Or what is it that caused me, what caused me to be like this? Did this start happening when I started bodybuilding? Was I like this did I have these issues when I was young? Because there's a difference, right? There's a difference if it's just your environment, if it's a result of your environment versus a result of genetics. Maybe you had like some event happen to you. It's like when people say depression, I went on XYZ depression medication after they named some catastrophic event. Yeah, I could see how that would make you depressed. You probably aren't inherently were you always depressed? Or was it this thing that caused it? And that would be a situation where a medication, again, it's just my opinion, a medication might not be a great answer simply because you never really dealt with whatever the thing was. And now you're still on this medication, even though whatever it was is 10 years in the past. And now we're dealing with the ramifications of the whatever it is, So,
yeah.
But that's not to say I'm not anti-medication. So that's not what I'm saying. I just think looking at the context. So,
yeah, for sure. And I guess, how do you really tell the difference between someone who might be predisposed to, certain things versus something that's more acute? Because I feel like there is some people that are just kind of born that way. So it's like, would medication be a better option, or is there still kind of other things that are like more of a root cause that you could apply first? Or
yeah. So I think the question I would ask, and that's a really good thing to think about. I think the question I would ask, and I've asked myself this a lot, because I've really tried to figure out when I was in my early 20s. So little backstory, I had behavioral issues when I was young. So I always got good grades. I didn't really struggle from that aspect. I did my homework. I worked at that, right? But I had behavioral issues clear back in elementary school. So I was suspended in elementary school like 3 times at least, So I had, now outside of when I was literally suspended, I had perfect attendance and pretty much straight A's most of the way through, unless I was not there. So it got a little bit better. I got into junior high and a little bit better. I think my first year in junior high, which where I was at was 6th grade, so 6, 7, and 8, I got like 14 or 13 detentions in 6th grade. But I got really good grades.
Oh man.
And my goal, so I think it was, if you had 7 detentions or something, you would get a Friday night school, was what they had. It's like a Saturday school, that kind of thing. My goal my next year was no Saturday schools or no Friday night schools. I got none. I think I got 7. I missed it by 1. I think I got 7 detentions, and the 8th one was Friday night school. But so here's what was happening is I was getting better. What I was doing is, I think I was bored, which a lot of kids get bored. And I think there's probably a level of ADHD misdiagnosis with just bored kids, maybe, perhaps. I don't know. But long story short, you go on and on and on. I'd done some therapy, and now of there, I had some different medications, different like classes of medications, SSRIs, like dopamine agonist stuff like Wellbutrin. So a little bit of everything. Early 20s, really broke, going to school full time, working full time, trying to like get my coaching business, doing all that. So I'm way overworked. And I didn't realize that I also had really low testosterone. I think my levels were like 100 nanograms total back then at like 20.
That's crazy.
And granted, I've never touched any PEDs. Like, it was just, my body was just cooked. Yeah.
Damn. How does that even happen?
Just a lot of stress. Yeah. Terrible. Right. And I competed a couple times in there, which in hindsight is completely idiotic, but regardless, here we are. I had a therapist. I started going back to therapy then because it was kind of the darkest time, man. It was really difficult. And he had suggested potentially OCD based on these perfectionist tendencies. Fast forward later that kind of changed into, well, it doesn't seem like clinical OCD in the sense that I'm not going back and checking the oven 7 times, but it's definitely perfectionism to a point, right? And some, however you want to slice it. I don't really get stuck on labels. I don't care. It's just a way, I think it helps identify things maybe a little bit better and understand patterns, but I'm definitely not somebody that's ever going to be like, not going to be victimized by my whatever it is that they want to say. So my point in saying all that is that's a pretty long back history, clear back to childhood. So, your question about that is, my childhood wasn't bad. We didn't have a lot of money when I was young, but it wasn't, I had food, right? I had food and clothes. It wasn't anything terrible. It was fine. I think it was pretty, and then it got better and better and better as my parents became more successful, and there's nothing really bad there. The only thing I can really ever think of that I link to this is that I was very competitive. So I was put into motocross. So I raced motocross for years, and then wrestling, and so on and so forth. I think a lot of kids get into sports of some kind. I don't think that's unusual, right? And I don't think it's unusual for their parents to maybe push them or even live vicariously through them in some cases, So I don't think that that's unusual. I think maybe to the degree that I did, I think it was a little bit of me and also a little bit of them. Like, they gave me the push, but I also like to win. When I started winning, I was like, this is nice. I like this. And those are great personality traits for just having resilience and just never giving up and blah, 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 the whole thing, here we go, whatever. But you can also see how I developed those things at a young age and then ended up with probably more rooted tendencies when it came down to like running the business. And then of course I gravitated towards bodybuilding, because why wouldn't I? People gravitate. That's the thing, is people gravitate towards those things naturally. That's just how it is. Like, that's why they're there, because it sounds appealing to them. It's not a coincidence. I mean, they could have influence by their family. They're like, well, my dad was a bodybuilder. Now, none of my parents did that, so that's not true. But they're like, well, my dad was a bodybuilder, or my mom, or whatever. That could be the case, but you've seen families where there'll be maybe two children, and one of them actually latches onto the thing and the other one doesn't, or they end up completely different. So they probably have influence by more parent than another, or they probably had influence by like a grandparent or a different friend group, or they were just born with different genetic, they're just wired a little bit differently from the start. My brother is my younger brother. We get along really great. He's way different than me. So much, drastically different than me. He's a lot more ADD or ADHD. He's very mechanically inclined. He can work on anything. So he's really good at that. But our personalities are way different. So we came from the same people, and they actually exposed us to a lot of the same stuff. So there's a genetic difference, probably, maybe, I don't know.
For sure.
So
Yeah, sounds like it.
so there's maybe a case of genetics. And if I went to, I still go to therapy now, and my current therapist is not she's not a psychiatrist. So I don't think she prescribes anything, but I've been on and off. You know what, maybe I would benefit from something here and there. I could make an argument for that, but at the same time, I've been there and done that, and I am just like, I'd rather just learn coping skills and just deal with it sometimes. And that's kind of where I'm at in my life. And the other example, that you mentioned would be was it an acute stressor? You can normally vet that out pretty easy, because, well, it's like, well, did you have those problems historically, or what happened that led you to take this thing? And it could be an event, but it could also be, like in our space, it could be like, well, I have horrendous gut issues, and so I'm depressed and have anxiety. And you're like, well, yeah, because most of your serotonin is produced in your gut, and then it's like you fix their gut and they feel better. Like, I don't even know if I need this medication anymore. Yeah. So that type of stuff happens too. You see that type of correlation too. It's you have some kind of health issue or lifestyle problem or something like that. Or you're like me, you're predisposed to addiction. That's why I don't drink. Because I am way too predisposed to addiction. That's why, like, hard drugs, like any, like, crazy, I'm like, nah. I'm like, don't get me close. I'm like, don't give me any, no, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on the show. I'm like, no cocaine. I'm not going to touch any of that shit. I don't want it. Leave me alone. I've never done it. I'll never do it. Because what am I going to do? Work more? Until my adrenals crash?
Pretty much.
Right? Until my adrenals crash out. So it's like, I don't want to do part of that. So, no. but that's also knowing what my tendencies are. And I've learned that, and it's taken time. So with our clients, or if you're coaching, or it's yourself, even if you're listening and you're not a coach, it's really just understanding what things within your environment are probably contributing to your tendencies. And it's not that you have to stop fitness or stop bodybuilding or any of that. It's just maybe you need to diversify a little bit. Maybe that will help you, right? So a lot of bodybuilders, like very serious and fitness enthusiasts, or whatever you want to call it, they don't have a lot of hobbies. Their only hobby is like, we like burgers. We go out and eat food on the weekend because they're deprived all week, so they like, well, that's a hobby. And I'm like, well, it's a hobby, but it's also that you just want food because you don't ever eat that stuff.
Yeah, well, it's like a hobby of delayed gratification.
It's a reward, right? Yeah. Like, do you have any hobbies that aren't food related? Yeah, right. Do you have any hobbies? They're like, well, I like to hike. Cool. You like the outdoors. Could you tell me about your hikes? They're like, well, I hiked 15 miles up a 9% grade mountain. And I'm like, that's pretty extreme. I think that actually probably feeds right into your tendencies, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's like I always say, I don't have hobbies because I can't help myself. I just go too far into. I'm like, I need to get perfect. Like, I'm gonna be the best at this, and so I'm just like, I can't. I'll lose focus on whatever I'm doing. So I'm just gonna like be a perfectionist about bodybuilding and have that be my own.
And that's always an interesting discussion. Is one of the rebuttals you get is that these hobbies or outside things detract from the results that they're getting within their main interest, which is fitness. And that could be true. I guess to an extent that could be true, because if you're I don't know, if your hobby's like camping in a desert for 2 weeks at a time, I mean, yeah, you're not going to, if you're doing that like twice, 3 times a year, I mean, that's probably not going to hurt you, but you know, you don't have your food, you're not training, you know, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I could see that. Fine. You can still exist within a hobby. Like I like, so stuff I like, I'm into cars. I like cars. So I can go to a car meet, right? I can drive my car, I can do the stuff. I can still eat, whatever. I probably like high horsepower cars because it's probably an adrenaline thing because I did competitive sports, right? And I've raced motocross. So that's probably why I like it. But it has nothing to do with, it has zero to do with bodybuilding. And then one of the things I really like is that when I go to if I go to a car meet, no, we don't talk about bodybuilding at all. Now, granted, if it's in the middle of the summer and I show up in a tank top, someone's making a comment. Yeah, they're going to make a comment. They're going to ask me like, how do I get like you? And what do I eat and all this shit? And I'm like, dude, I don't want to talk about this shit. I do it every day. This is what I do all day. This morning I did like 25 emails on Saturday morning. I'm like, about this. I don't want to talk about it. You know, I'm getting away from this. That's why I'm here. So yes, it does come up, but again, it's not related to it. I still really like wrestling. So we'll go to college. We live in Ohio. So we're in big wrestling country. So we go to Ohio State, like dual meets and all that stuff. It's fun. It's fun, man. It distracts me from those things. The other thing the other thing it's taught me is that I can be a lot more flexible with, and I know now this discussion turned into mostly perfectionist types because that's probably what most people are. Yeah. It's taught me more flexibility. So you can have a level of flexibility that benefits you, or you can have so much that you are getting less results. So for example, if you're a female and your maintenance calories are 2,000 and you go on a trip and you eat 4,000 calories for 6 days in a row, you'll probably gain some weight. You're probably going to set yourself back for a week or two. Now there's one of two things. Either A, you're like, I'm okay with that, and I'm willing to just take the extra time to get back to where I want to be. That's okay. If that's what you're cool with, then whatever. If you're trying to be the best bodybuilder you can, maybe that's not the best solution. But you could realize that, hey, my meals aren't exact, but I can track macros, or I can track my calories for a couple days while I'm gone and get pretty close to where I need to be. And what happens is you get back and you're in the same exact spot, outside of maybe you retained a little bit of fluid from like flying or something, right? You can do things like we did that seminar, the seminar event last week. I planned a deload. So I knew that I was taking days off from training before I went. And that was just part of my plan. So I just planned it. That way, when I was there, I wasn't like, shit, when am I going to get to the gym? I got to get up at 4. I got to get up at 4 because I got to go to Dragon's Lair in Las Vegas and train at the bodybuilding gym. I'm like, no, I don't give a shit. Because I basically am figuring out, it's like figuring out ways to make those things work for you as part of your, as part of your plan. There is a point where it is deleterious. If I had went to Vegas and ate like a complete clown and like drank till I got sick every night, okay, I'm probably going to feel like total crap when I get back, and it's going to set me back a little bit. But I'm in the middle of an off season and I'm eating high calories. So worst case scenario for me is I probably lose weight while I'm there because I can't keep up on the ridiculous amount of food, and I'm not hungry enough to freaking force feed food while I'm there. So it's not that big of a deal. So yeah, I don't know. But the other thing about that too is things will happen whether you plan them or not. There will occasionally be situations where things happen, and if you freak out every single time, you're doing, A, you can't change it. It already happened. B, you're probably doing yourself more harm than anything by freaking out and detonating for a week afterwards, because then your training sucks because you're freaking stressed out. You're depressed. I'm like, dude, it happened. Just, you're going to have to move on.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. But that's resilience. Like, that is, if you are a perfectionist type, if you are a perfectionist type and you can't form that resilience and that ability to sometimes go with the flow, you probably will get worse results. As much as you think you're trying to help yourself, you probably are actually inhibiting some of your results by the amount of sheer stress that you're putting on your body. So it's a weird,
Yeah.
and it's hard though, right? Because you can't quantify that. You can't see that. You can feel it, but you can't see it. It's not in the numbers. But I can tell you from doing this long enough that you will get worse results. When a client that's like that comes back from a weekend away and it didn't go perfect, but they're still pretty chill, like, we're good. We can just carry on. They don't have any problems. They're going to keep getting good results. When the person comes back and they're a complete wreck and they're panicking and all this other shit, they probably are stunting their progress over time.
Yeah.
So sometimes not being perfect is actually better than trying to be perfect.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. So you don't want to stress yourself out
Right.
more than you have to.
Yeah. Could you be, it's, you know, could you be, what's probably a better scenario, being 100%, 90% of the time, or being 95%, 100% of the time?
Yeah.
Maybe the result, maybe the net result is exactly the same, but I'll tell you, one is going to be way more better quality of life than the other one, at least, if
Yeah,
nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I guess, like, what are some of the most, common patterns that you see in clients that would, like, suggest maybe an imbalance? I mean, besides, like, the perfectionism and stuff like, or maybe if there's someone who isn't normally a certain way, but all of a sudden they kind of shift gears and they're doing something new, and you're just kind of like, what's going on here? Like, what's the root of this? How do we address it? That sort of thing.
Yeah. So let's say that all those things, your environment's checking out, you're feeling good, or I'm not saying you're not feeling good. You're doing everything you're supposed to be doing. You're not really suffering from any of those tendencies, but you're still experiencing, maybe you experience like random bouts of anxiety. And coach, I cannot for the life of me figure out why I'm getting anxious. There's nothing wrong with my life. So that could be confusing and uncomfortable. So maybe that's a situation where you do have a gut issue, for example, right? Or you do have like a nutrient deficiency, perhaps. Those are probably the two most common things that I'm seeing on a regular basis would be, and they probably go hand in hand, because if you have a gut issue, you're more susceptible to having nutrient deficiencies. You don't absorb nutrients as well. So, or if you've had a history of anything else that would cause deficiency, like undereating, yo-yo dieting, birth control, pregnancy, stuff like that. So those individuals, despite doing the right things and having the right environment, could still be experiencing some anxiety or depression. So that's when we're like, well, what's going on? Let's get some data. Like, let's look at your labs. Let's do a GI map. Let's figure out, like, what maybe based on what other symptoms you're having, we can figure out what testing to do for that person. Because for those people, there probably is something underlying that we can address to get them feeling better. So there's normally an answer there. With with sometimes with people, there's nothing on the test, like they look fine, but they're still having those problems. So it's either A, genetic, or B, it's them, it's environment. So I'm always going through a checklist, right? I don't want to make accusations. I don't want to assume that somebody's that what they're feeling is not valid, because they're feeling it. Yeah. They are feeling it. I mean, and life experience is a big part of that. I mean, it's something that if you looked at yourself 5 years ago versus now, even maybe something that stressed you out 5 years ago wouldn't even really register on your radar now, because the events of life change. The responsibilities get bigger, all that stuff, right? So life experience can create resilience for sure. But yeah, I do. But usually, if we were looking at like the sequence of events, usually, besides having a genetic predisposition, usually it's the behaviors that cause the gut issue or that cause the nutrient deficiency. It's normally in that order. And then you're stuck in a cycle, because your behaviors are causing the gut problem, and the GI issue is causing more of the behaviors. So how do you?
Yeah.
Well, and the way I think about it is sometimes with somebody that's experiencing a lot of those problems, we've been talking a lot about depression or anxiety, is how hard is it to advocate for yourself and to do things for yourself when you feel terrible? It's pretty hard.
Yeah.
It is pretty difficult. If anyone that's been really depressed can attest to that. It can be very difficult to just force yourself to do these things that you're like, well, you need to get out and hang out with your friends, or you need to get out and, I don't know, like whatever, right? You need to have a hobby, or you need to journal. I mean, I don't know, whatever it is. So that can be so difficult and so daunting because you just feel so shitty. So with those, with a case like that, you really need to do one of two things. Is maybe you do need to seek, some therapy or some counseling, because now you can have a person that's not biased, that can give you objective, because you're not really being fully objective. You can have someone that can be more objective with you and help give you some actionable steps that you're able to do. And then B is what health related items can we work on to get you feeling better? It's like, can you take XYZ supplement to start working on your gut? It's like, I can probably do that. It's like, well, that's a start. It's something. It's you have to do that. You have to do that in conjunction with the therapy, or do it in conjunction with the psych work. But there's I think there's this idea that with coaching that a lot of coaches just expect the clients to do this perfect plan that might be kind of complex. It's like, man, I could do that if I felt good. But I don't feel good, which is the whole reason that you want me to do it in the first place. And it's really hard to do it when I don't feel good. So we have to think about what things can we do? What actionable steps can we actually wrap our head around and manage? It might be really small, man. It might be little stuff. We might have to start low. What can we actually bite off? Don't bite off more than you can chew. It's like, what can we do? But it's probably going to start with fixing the underlying health portion. So So this idea that a new client comes in and a coach might say, first thing we need to do is get your lifestyle perfect, get your stress under control. That is the thing. We have to do that before we do XYZ. Protocol stuff, I guess, whatever. That sounds really good in theory, except, again, they feel so shitty that they're having a hard time doing it. So sometimes the answer is a little bit of instant gratification can actually be the better option. Right? What if I can, because I think about it this way, if I could just get my client, if there's some basic changes to their plan, whether it be supplementation or lifestyle stuff that's not too hard, if I can get like 20% improvement, like something that's at least noticeable, they're much more inclined to be able to do the bigger stuff. And if they feel 20% better, guess what? Stress also will drop because you feel better. So you're not constantly walking around waiting on the next anxiety attack.
Yeah. That's
so
fair. So like,
well, I mean, it's like, it's all the same. I mean, it's all the same stuff. It's just, I guess my point there is it's kind of figuring out which order do you need to address things in.
Right. Yeah. I would even say that like sometimes supplementation might be a good first because it's easy. And even if there's a placebo effect, it might have an impact.
I mean, yes. And that is true for some people. For some people, that absolutely is true. It really does help. It, again, even if it's a marginal difference, if it's enough to feel, that's motivating. If they can get something at the beginning, that is they're like, there's some hope. I feel it. I can feel a little bit of a difference. This is good. And they're much more inclined to buy into that process and then do the other stuff.
Yeah, that's fair. Get some momentum going.
Anything, man. Give me just a little bit of forward progress, and we can normally start to step our way up to the bigger stuff because they can tell a difference. And so they're buying into the process. They're more motivated. You know how that goes. And then on and on you go.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I guess the last thing would probably be, is there any, I mean, speaking of supplementation, when it comes to supplements, are there any that you would recommend, like for people that are more anxious and for people that are more depressed? Like, what about things like 5-HTP?
Yeah.
Like, would that be something that might be helpful or,
Yeah.
What?
I think so. I think that I'm not supplementing for neurotransmitters all the time. If the psychology is not so bad that it's inhibiting their ability to follow the plan. If it is bad enough where it's inhibiting them from doing it, then that might be where we support some neurotransmitter with some supplementation. So if we want to raise serotonin levels, maybe we use some 5-HTP. That will help convert into more serotonin. Maybe we use some like L-tyrosine or L-dopa to bring our dopamine levels up. I like things that are kind of balancing as well. So some good options there are saffron extract is a good one. So saffron extract has a really nice balancing effect. It kind of goes both ways. So it can help with dopamine. It can help with serotonin. You can look for the Afron, which is the trademark version of that. So that's a really nice one. Or something like Bacopa has a nice balancing effect. Any of your general adaptogenic herbs can increase stress resilience. Ashwagandha, rhodiola, relora, like those, they're increasing resilience to stress. So those can be helpful. So there's like 5 or 6 things. I mean, you can use those things. They'll help a little bit, right? But it might be enough. It may be enough to actually get you to feel just good enough to where you can do the other stuff. That's probably going to make the biggest difference.
Yeah. And the circumstance of anxiety. I mean, like, I guess like GABA, for example.
Yeah, theanine or GABA supplementation.
Yeah. Does GABA supplementation, does that work? Because I know it's like benzos, for example, that works on your GABA receptors, and sometimes maybe you hit too many.
GABA can help. Theanine's a good option too, because theanine tends to raise blood or brain levels of GABA a little bit better, and a lot of people have more success with theanine, or some people just mix the two. You can use like a few grams of GABA with 200 or 300 milligrams of theanine as well. The good thing about that stuff is it's not going to be like sedative to the point where you're going to be like taking Xanax and you just have to, there's a, it's like, yeah, you're not anxious, but you also are not functional.
You're not even
right. You're basically just a zombie. So there's got to be, there's got to be a level of practicality there, right? That's one of the biggest complaints with a lot of medications like that is people just get sick of feeling completely numb.
Yeah,
like, man, I mean, I'm not anxious anymore, but I don't even feel like a person. So that's not going to work for very long. So cool.
Yeah,
awesome,
cool. Well, I think the last thing, sorry, one more. I think this is just, I found this part fascinating. But like mentioning things like Benadryl when it comes to histamine and stuff. You mentioned that it can like affect you long term cognitively. Like, how does that work? What is the actual risks? I remember you saying at one point, like, you think that at some point there might be a connection between, someone's antihistamine intake and like dementia down the road.
So from what I've seen, there's an anticholinergic effect. So choline levels get depleted with a lot of antihistamine use over time. What does that lead to dementia? I mean, there's a possibility that it could. That's been suggested in the literature. I don't know. That would have to be a really long-term study, probably, to be able to actually make that connection. I would imagine that would have to be like decades long. But definitely anticholinergics. I mean, choline helps with memory recall, concentration, cognitive function. So I definitely wouldn't be leaning on antihistamines as like a everyday. They're like, well, if someone's like, man, I've taken Benadryl every night for the last 10 years to go to sleep. I'm like, okay, well, we need to look at why are we having a histamine response? Like, do we have an autoimmune issue? Do we have a gut issue? Like there's something that's causing you to have that response. So antihistamines, not a fan. Histamines, there's, histamine intolerance definitely can happen, but it's usually indirectly a result of something else. Yeah, most of the time.
Makes sense.
But cool.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, that was the last question.
I'm gonna get on this next call, but just tag me and all that good stuff.
Yeah. All right. Any last things you want to tell people where to find you?
You guys can find me on Instagram. I'm Austin ST number 8 on Instagram. I post about this stuff, do lots of podcasts. If you're interested in any services or anything, my email is in my bio, so feel free to reach out. I have a variety of, I do everything. So coaching, mentorship, consultation services. If you guys need help with labs, if you're like, I don't know what the hell's wrong with me, Austin, please look at my blood work. And we can also do that.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on. I'll let you get going. But hopefully you'll come back.
I'm sure I will. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
See you.